A super cycle could be developing here for the euro/Australian dollar pair. So first off, read this disclaimer carefully and do your good deed of the day by liking and subscribing. So we go here to Forex and we go all the way down here to this pair. We see a 3.52-ish% here from the low, minus 6.22% away from the 52-week highs. So here we have the pair, and this is the gargantuan, multi-decade picture. We go all the way back here to 1994. So this is obviously like a super big picture, but you see here this great time cycle. So if you look at price and then you look at the time cycle, so rise, decline, rise, decline, rise, decline, rise, decline, and rise, decline. So you can see yourself that there's a relatively decent match here between the major time cycles and the price itself. There is a tendency for there to be some smaller cycles within, though I want to focus here on the primary big time cycle because that is relevant now, given that we formed this very nice low here, and potentially this could be the low and the beginning of a multi-year rising phase here. So this rising phase, it extends into well into 2023. Of course, we need to be a bit careful when projecting that far into the future, given that this major time cycle has worked for such a long time. Though there's an increased probability that this time cycle reflects something more profound underlying between these two major economic regions. Okay, so we do have the time cycles. We do see that we got oversold on the weekly RSI. So low weekly RSI marked the low here, and likely the low here. If you look here, low RSI marked the price low. So there's some interesting relationship here between RSI and price action, in which it forms it has a tendency to form the highs and the lows of the time cycles. Looking at the PPO, nothing really in particular happening here. We did see that during the previous major decline, we did go significantly below the red 200-week moving average. So we do have a bit of a mirroring effect between this and this. Okay, so let's explore further. So we jump here into the daily data points, like that. So these are, the daily data points, and we have really zoomed in here. So even at this very, it still is kind of a big picture level, but, more granular than, the super cycles. Here you see that there are some gray small cycles, and when you look here at price, and then you look at the time cycles, there's a relatively decent match here. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, that would be really surprising and extremely beneficial, of course, but there is far better than a random relationship. When we compare the time cycle with the seasonality for the pair. So the seasonality shows that, let's first look at the last 10 years. So even when we look at last 10 years and compare with the 20, you see that there's the same general relationship here. So there's a tendency of weakness heading towards July, and then all of a sudden August is off with a bang. Looking here at the time cycle, so it suggests some continued weakness here, towards the 14-ish of June. You see here that we do have the time cycle go through a declining phase here, and you can see that it's on the 5th of August that the low of the time cycle is formed. So when the the new rising phase begins, that is August, and that keeps us throughout the entire rising phase, along with the strongest month. So there's a relatively decent match here between the small time cycles and the seasonality. What would corroborate the idea that the next time cycle might be a bit muted in terms of rallies, that is this red 200-day moving average, which is pointing downwards. And you see here that it has been relatively solid resistance here. And that is likely to put a bit of a cap on the rally. If you look, a cap on the rising phase, that is, that is around the corner here in June and July. On top of that, we do have RSI, which, it is pushing into a territory that the bulls have struggled with in the past. You see that when we look here longer term, it is very rare for this pair to get overbought or oversold. So, and that relationship is very likely to continue. So I do think that we have found various, rather interesting relationships here. Here is the investing.com Euro index. So this gives us, much more, this is basically like, it's the Euro index. It gives us a very nice picture of what is happening with that currency, and that is obviously very relevant for the study we just did. So we can see here that the euro has really been on quite a tear, and we are close to breaking out here above the highs of July 2008. So there's a pretty substantial thing happening here, but that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. We do, however, see that we are pushing into a higher level here on the RSI. The PPO is also, it's in a territory that is simply just rare. Hence, it shouldn't come as a huge shock if we do see maybe it cool down a bit. That would make a lot of sense. And as far as pulling off a breakout, it is better to pull off a breakout after having relaxed a little bit, because in order to now in this move that's already getting a bit long in the tooth, to make that full bore breakout now, that is very ambitious. That is contingent on a very strong catalyst. I think you can compare it to other things, right? Running a marathon is easier if you have just had a break, you have relaxed. But if you run a couple marathons in a row, then the probability of completing a marathon goes down. Same thing with everything else in life. So there's just this basic logic when it comes to if you are going to pull off something that is difficult, then it's easier to do it if you have a bit of a break, cool down a bit first. But anyway, obviously there's something very interesting here happening with the Euro index, and that is certainly very relevant here for not just the Euro Aussie pair, but a bunch of other currencies, because it's important to be aware that even though America has been the predominant empire after World War II, for the vast majority of Earth's history, the planet has been managed predominantly from Europe. That's where most of the empires have been, and talking about reversion to the mean, historical themes and patterns repeating themselves, which we do look a lot at, when analyzing charts and these kinds of patterns. It also makes sense that historical relationships can also all of a sudden reappear, because many people are focusing on the rise of China. But I do think that one of the plot twists could be a resurgence in Europe that it's not fully baked into the narrative.